Kumlen Ablak Gemaras Matzei Shabbos Parshas Kairach Gimel Tammuz. So the last thing that we have been learning about was that if you had to repeat the exercise and add more animals, what do you do with all the animals that were already set aside? So we brought down the Mishnah that the bulls, they all have to be burnt, even if it's 2 or 3, they all have to be burnt outside the Beis Hamikdash. And and the question then was, what do you do if you, let's say, the goats, you spill the blood of the goats, you have to repeat the exercise again. And so what do you do if it's the Seir Mishalech? Well, it was the animal that you had to do again was the Seir Lechata, so you shechted it 3 times. But what do you do with the Seir Mishalech? You toss all 3 off. And we said no, that when it comes to the Seir Azazel, you only toss off 1 because the pasuk says oisai in singular form. So you only throw off 1. And the question is now, which one? Itma, we learned. Rapapi, Mashmei de Rabba. Rapapi said the name of Rabba. Rishon Mishalech. It's the first one. Let's say you ended up with 3 different goats that are suitable to be thrown off because the blood spilled out on 2 occasions. So you had to do another 2 sets. So now you have 3 animals that have to be tossed off. So which one do you throw? Only 1. It's the first one. However, Rapsimi Mashmei de Rabba. Rapsimi is the name of Rabba. Is Achron Mishalech. It's the last one that you toss up. Says the Gemara. This what Rav Simi said, name of Rav, the Amar Achron Mishalech. It's the last one, the 3rd lot, the pair that you throw off the cliff. Kasavri holds Hoyil the Gomar boy Kapara. That was the final one. That's where we completed the Kapara, and therefore that's the one that's the Zazel. We had the same opinion when it comes to the what do you call it? That Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon said when it comes to the bull, it's only the last one that is that makes them tameh, because that's the one that completes the kapara. Fine. What possible logic does Rapapi have, who says in this name of the same person, Rabba, that is the first one? Ma'ikasav, what does he hold? Says the Gemara, Savala, he follows the view of Rabbi Yossi. The Amr says that mitzvah berishin, you should always do the first one. That's the candidate for the Azazel. You throw them off the cliff. Now the Gemara is going to want to know which Rabbi Yossi were you referring to. Hi, Rabbi Yossi. Which Rabbi Yossi are you referring to? Ilema Rabbi Yossi, the kuppers. Is it the Rabbi Yossi that we learned about? They had all these different boxes in the Beis Hamikdash where people deposited their money. And when it came to the Machzah Shekel, there were 3 boxes. People deposited money. We had 3 different occasions. You remember more when they filled up these boxes and then they used them to buy all the kabbanas that were necessary for the Beis Hamikdash. So if it's the Rabbi Yossi of the boxes, and what did Rabbi Yossi say there? Now we learned shalosh kupas. There were 3 boxes. Shalosh. Each box was large enough to contain the volume of 3 saw. And people deposited. First, they deposited in 1 box, and when that was completed, they deposited the second. And when that was completed, they deposited a third. When that was full, they went to the third. Shebehem toim min esalishcha. And that is what they did. They used to take from that chamber where you cost of a lamb, and that's where they take money from. And there they wrote on each box Aleph Beis Gimel. Now, why was it important to put these numbers on them? Aleph 1, 2, 3. But Tanya Rabbi Yossi Lama cost of lamb Aleph Beis Gimel. Why 1, 2, 3? Lay that to know to know which is the one that was filled first, and that's the one that we're going to use. Lahavi Heimena Rishon, to use that box full first. Shemitza Berishon, you should always use the first one. So this Rabbi Yossi, who lays down a rule, seems to lay down a general rule. You should always use the first one that was designated for a particular mitzvah. So the same thing would apply to the seir, the goat that's going to be tossed off the cliff. It should be the Sila Azazel. It should be the first one, the first pair. Says the Gemara, how can you compare the case of the seir Azazel and the case of the Machzah Shekel? Dilma, this chazoi kamaisa lois chazoi basraisa. Remember, the first box first filled up, and then they went to the second one. When the first one was full, the second one wasn't available, wasn't there. So therefore, we say do first number 1, and then over time people bring more Machzah Shekel, then you go 2 and 3. But in our case over here, when you're ready to throw them off the cliff, they're all suitable. How do we know which one to use? Elo Rabbi Yossi the Pesach. Rabbi Yossi by a korban Pesach. And what does he say there? Now we learned. Hamafrish pischai. What about if somebody set aside a korban Pesach? Somebody set aside a korban Pesach, va'avad, lost it. V'hifrish achatachtav. So you went and you purchased another lamb, and this all happened before Erev Pesach Chatzos. So it hasn't yet been the time for bringing a korban. And then they located the original lamb, and now you have over here in front of you 2 lambs, and they're both now suitable for Bikurim Pesach. Which one should you use? They're both standing before you. So the first opinion says, they're both suitable. Choose whichever one you want. These are words of the Chachamim. Rabbi Yosi says the mitzvah is with the first one. You take the first animal that you set aside for the current Pesach, that's the one you should use. The second one was better, then bring it. Otherwise, use the first one. So Rabbi Yosi generally lays down a rule, even though they're both suitable, use the first one. So the same thing would apply to Se'ir Azazel. This ends the 5th Perek, and now we're ready to commence the 6th Perek. A very few Masechtas in Shas, which is so focused that we are actually sticking to the topic, and we very, very seldom digress at all from the topic of the avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, which we're continuing now with the goats that we just.
Want your face there?
Sorry?
Have Leah and Harvey Teller, yeah?
No, there's a switch over there, Harvey Teller. Leah.
What should I do with Leah? How will I have to switch it off?
Harvey, if you can mute yourself.
What
Mute
message?
yourself, Harvey.
We'll just wait till it's connected.
Shnei.
Okay? 1 second. It's connected.
Okay.
Are you there?
Shnei Se'idei Yom Kippurim. So now we set aside 2 goats for Yom Kippur. One of them is going to be used for the Chatas, it's called Hashem, and the other one is going to be used to be thrown off the cliff, the Azazel. So Shnei Se'idei Yom Kippurim, you have 2 goats of Yom Kippur. Mitzvah, ideally, and this is a mitzvah from the Torah, and that both of these animals should be shown equal. The mara in appearance, the kaima in height, uvedamim and in value, and you should purchase them both on the same day. The afa pisha ain't shown, but b'di'evid, if you didn't get 2 animals that are identical, shading is still kosher, and so too if lokach echad hayom the echad hamacher, if you did one today and one tomorrow, also shading is kosher. So this is a mitzvah. Remember, we learned that in Kachim, in order for something to be not only obligatory, but that if you don't comply with this, you have for your mitzvahs only if the Torah repeats something twice. If it says only once, it doesn't matter. The Rishonim ask over here, how is it possible to have 2 animals that are identical? Because we'll have in the Gemara Sanhedrin regarding the Ben Soyer and Moira, it says that a Ben Soyer and Moira, the parents have to have the same voice, look the same height, and to look the same. And it says over there, it never happened, it never happened because it's impossible to find people that are exactly the same. So how do you find 2 animals that are identical, exactly the same? That's the question that the Tracy showing me. Everybody asks the same question. And the general answer is that when it doesn't mean exactly the same, it means more or less the same. That's one answer. Others, the Shagizai actually answers, over there were 3 requirements. Not only they should be the same height and the same appearance, but it also says over there that they should have the same voice. And 3 requirements is too difficult. Animals don't have that issue of the voice. But Rashi, to avoid all that, it seems Rashi says, when it says it should look the same, it doesn't mean they should actually look the same. Rashi says it means you have the same color. They should be either white, black, or gray, or the Bach says red. He learns in Rashi's red. They should be the same color. In other words, Rashi probably is bothered by this very same question. How can you have 2 things identical? It doesn't mean identical. It means in the same, species, or they look very similar. Okay. So the 4 things that we say that there's a mitzvah, but if you didn't do it, fine. Mes echad mehem. If one of them died, okay, what happens? You have a pair. You have one animal is going to go to chatas, one's going to be azazel. But remember, that happens when you make the girdle, and that girdle is made right before you spray the blood of you shech the bull, and then you make the girdle, and then you do the ketores, and then you do the blood. So what happens if before you made the girdle, one of them died? So what do? Yikar zug l'sheni. Not a problem. Just get another animal, and you still have your set. And that's a bit problematic. In fact, the Achronim have a problem there. You just said in the Mishnah that it's a mitzvah in the Torah that they should both be likichas and ke'echad. They should both be purchased at the same time. And then you tell me if one of them died, lufafal, get another one, which means not at the same time. Why shouldn't you buy another pair? If it's a mitzvah that you should have them both, both at the same time. Why are we not buying another pair? And the first animal is going to go wander about till he gets a mum, contracts a mum, and like you do all other occasions. So the Shagis Ayi wants to say that it's as if Bezdin, it's not the moment you buy it, it's the moment when you're ready to designate it to be a carbon. So it's as if you make it tonight, as if you had in mind that if it's not possible, the other animal, one of the animals die, then I don't want the Kedusha to coincide with this animal, to fall on this animal until the other animal is available. So it's as if likichasan ke'echad. It's the girl that makes it like likichasan ke'echad in a sense.
Matul,
Yeah.
if these two seirim are potential carbon, don't you always have to have a reserve? For every carbon, you have to have a reserve?
That was a carbon tummy. They always had 4
How many
animals
carbon
there.
tummy had a reserve?
Yeah. Says the Gemara. But even that reserve, they had to bring it out and start again. After they made the lottery, so they already know which animal is going to be La Hashem and which animal is going to be Azazel. And we also learned before that ideally you should actually put the girdle on top of each animal. After they made the girdle, then suddenly mace, one of the animal died. In this case already, Yovi Zugacher, you have to bring another pair. The Yagril Aleim B'Tchil. You got to bring a whole new set. And now and repeat the exercise of the girdle. You can't just bring another animal to a shua because it has to be by girdle. And the girdle has to be both at the same time. One's a chattas and one is a zazel. So you have to do the exercise again, bring 2 new animals. What's going to happen is you have one leftover animal that's good, one that's dead. You bring 2 new animals and you make a girdle like you made in the beginning. Says and this is what you say. Now you know exactly which one died because you know on the right side we had the whole argument there. You know, right side, the left side. You know which is the chata. You know which animal died. But you say the following words: Im shel. Now these are not the words you actually say. Im shel shemes. If the animal that died with the chatas, you don't say that because you know which one it is. This is what you say: Zeh she'olav ha'geilu l'shem. If the one that died is the one that's a chatas, you don't say that. Then yiskayim tachta. What you do say is this animal should become the chatas. And then, in other words, you say that whichever one it is that died, you say this one is going to take the place of that one. Okay. What do you go? And the hasheni, and what do you do with the other animal? Yida achi yistai. Now we're not sure which animal is this for hasheni. Is this the leftover from the first set because one animal died and there's now a residual animal? Is that the one when you say hasheni, you let it wander about? In other words, you're going to use the entire new set, one for a chattas and one for the azazel, or the other way around. The original azazel is still good, let's say, and it's the sheni is the second set that you don't need the one for azazel. That's the one. I think we'll talk about it in the next few days. Hasheni yida, let it wander about achi yistayim until it contracts a mum. The yemacha and you sell it. What do you do with the money? You buy animals to birds to keep on filling them as bear to keep it occupied all the time. The mission is explained now. And what is the reason why the question is, what happens if, let's say, if what do you call it? The remaining and the first lot, the azazel died, and the chatas is the remaining chatas. Right, is the remaining animal. So we bring another pair, we do azazel. Now you have 2 animals for a chatas, right? First, leftover from the first set, and now you have from the second set. One of those is going to go up to be the carbon chatas. The other one, we're going to let it wander about, contract the mum. Why? We have a general rule that a carbon chatas, there are 5 different kinds of carbon chatas, but if something happens to them, what we do is, we don't just let it wander about. To contract the mum, we put it inside a pen and we close the door and let it just starve. In other words, it's called chatas hameses. So why in this case over here do we say let it wander about and contract a mum and sell it with the money, buy things? So he explains, the Tanakhama explains, because that's an ordinary private individual carbon. But when it comes to a communal carbon, ain chatas tzibur mesa. Communal carbon, it does not die, and therefore it's still a valid carbon. It's still we do not follow this rule that these are the chatois hamesa that have to die. Chatas tzibur does not die. Okay.
Can I just ask? I'm not clear what actually happened here. So you had 2. I had a pair to start with. One dies, then you get another pair
after the girl. We're talking about after you make the girl.
So it dies after the girl. You get another pair, and then you make this statement over both of them. Or
No, no, no.
which one are you
Over
making?
the one
as-
that, not, 1 second. You make a statement over the one that died. So whichever one died, if the Chatas died, then when you make the second guard, you say the Chatas here that came out, Chatas, you are taking the place of the first set. If it was the Azazel that died, we say to the second one, this is the Azazel, you're taking the place of the Azazel, the first one. The remaining one now is a question, which one are we using for the remaining one? Are we, because now you have two. And that is something Gemara will discuss later. The Mishnah usually calls it Sheni. Now, Sheni can generally would mean the second one, from the new lot. But Sheni can also mean, we'll see later, maybe means the one that's left over from the first lot. Because now you have a perfect pair. Maybe you should use the entire pair.
But now you've made a complete new Goral again on the next new two.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
You need a
exactly what
pair,
you've
a set of two.
But you got two remaining ones now.
One of them is going to be used, and one of them is left over. Right? Remember, the fourth one is dead.
Right.
So you have a total now of 3 live ones. One will be used for Azazel, one will be used for Chatas, and there's one left over one, whichever one it is, either the Chatas or the Azazel. And we let it wander about until it gets a mum, because since it's a Chatas tzibur, it's not a private Chatas, it doesn't die. However, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He holds Thomas. I hold that a Chatas tzibur does die. So if it's a Chatas that's remaining, you do the normal procedure by a Chatas, which is you let it die. You close the door and let it stop. Then Rabbi Yehuda says something else, which Gemara will discuss later. What's Rabbi Yehuda trying to say? But basically, he says here is nishpech hadam. If the blood, let's say, for example, of the chata spilled out before you had a chance to spray the blood, is yomus hamishtalech. Then the seir lazazel should be allowed to die. And meis hamishtalech. And if the seir azazel, one goes off the cliff, dies, then yishafech hadam. Then the blood from the chatos that you're going to use, pour it out. What exactly is he saying? Who's he arguing with, and all that? We will see in the Gemara later. Okay.
How do we reconcile Tsar Balachayim with leaving an animal to starve to death?
Tsar Balachayim is a mitzvah in the Torah, right? In fact, there's no one that's more machmer when it comes to Tsar Balachayim. In fact, we'll learn about mitzvah in the end of the second parak, whether it's Mahatorah, whether it's Rabbanon. But there's no one more machmer, even Peter and all these other organizations are so worried about animal rights, never thought of what the Torah says, or we learn out, that if you're sitting down to eat a meal, you're not allowed to eat before your animal eats. First, your animal has to eat. So there's nobody's more humane than the Torah. And the same Torah says, this is what you have to do. So there's not a question of Tzar Balachayim. The Torah says this is what you do. It's a mitzvah. Remember, Tzar Balachayim is not because we're compassionate. We do it because the Eibush said so. Right, we're having brachas. You're not allowed to say the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm compassionate. You're doing it because it's a mitzvah, like Shaluch HaKain and all that. Anyway, Gemara. This is what we're told to do here. Taraban, we learned. Okay, so there are a number of psukim regarding. Now we're going to understand. Where do you know that this mitzvah that we said that has to be equal? How do you know? And equal in 3 things, he said, in appearance, in height, and in value. How do you know that? Says the Gemara. Tell me what we learned. It says in the pasuk, Yikach on Yom Kippur, Yikach shnei seirei izim. You should take 2 goats. Now, seirei izim is in plural, so everyone knows that the minimum of plural is 2. Why does it say shnei? Mi yud seirei shnai. We already know that if the pasuk would have omitted the word shnei, just say take seirei izim, we would already know it means 2 goats. Why does it say 2? Ma tamad leim shnei. Why does it say 2? She is shneim shavim. We want the 2 to be identical. Now, okay, so how do you know the Torah insists on shnei that they should be equal? You're telling me in the Mishnah it's only lemitzvah. But if you couldn't find the 2 that are equal, it's all right. How do you know that? Maybe it's not all right. Tamalaymer, it says seir. It says in a few psukim seir in singular, and the next few psukim there in the Torah. So because it says v'hasoyer, it says 2 times soyer in singular form, to tell you that even each one as an individual, it's also right. Riba.
Where is it now, please?
Sorry?
Where are you now, please?
I am now 4 lines on the top of the page.
Which page?
Oh, Samach Beis on the Beis. If somebody has an art scroll there, what
62B1.
Which? 50?
62B2. 62B1 on the top.
Okay. Tamaleme come to tell you seir riba, because it says twice the word soyer in singular form, to tell you that even if it's on its own, they don't resemble each other, it's good enough. Now they're going to ask the other way around. the Gemara asks all the way around. So it seems like time of the Rabbi Rahman. The only reason is because the Torah included it. Hello, Rabbi Rahman. If you wouldn't have these words soyer written in singular form, hava mina psul, I would have thought that they are actually puzzle. Ikuva minolan. We have a general rule when it comes to kachim, it has to repeat it twice before we say that it's ma'akiv, that it's pivotal. Otherwise, if it says only once, it means lemitzvah. It means it's ideally a good idea. So why do we need the Torah to tell you soyer to inform us? It doesn't really matter if they're not equal. Even the Torah wouldn't have said soyer. We would say, okay, it's a mitzvah to have two identical animals, but if you don't, you don't. So Gemara says, I would have thought, because it says 3 times the word shnei, because it says 3 times the word shnei in the psukim immediately afterwards, it says 3 times the word shnei. I would have thought that why does it say repeats it 3 times? To tell you it must be identical. Says the Gemara, now that we talk and know that it doesn't matter. You can have them even they're not identical. So shnei lama. Why does it say 3 times? That you should be 2, which each time it says se'idim, we know already means se'idim, shnei is extra. 3 times the Torah has an extra word shnei to tell you that we want you to look the same. If it doesn't really matter, so why say 3 times? So I'll tell you why. Chad lemara, 1 for appearance, chad lekoima, 1 for height, and the chad ledome should be equal value. So the Mefarshim already asked, but we have no basis that they have to both be bought on the same day. The Gemara doesn't bring any makkah for it whatsoever. That has to be done on the same day. And they remain with a question mark. But interesting, the style of the Gemara here was a bit difficult. The Gemara starts off saying, that you should have 2 animals that are the same. Very good. Then the Gemara says, so how do you know b'diavad is kosher? So the Gemara brings a pasuk. The Gemara says, why do you need a pasuk? Of course b'diavad is kosher. So let's go back a step. So why did you ask me in the first place? How do you know that b'diavad is kosher? If automatically we say by kachim, everything is only a mitzvah, and otherwise, if you didn't do it, it's still all right. So what's the word asking? And how do you know that it's still kosher? What was the question in the first place? Unless it's more like a rhetorical question, the Tana is really is trying to lead up to the point that it says shnei and tell you how we learn that out. Not really asking a question.
Where's the place, please? In the
62B1, left-hand column, the last paragraph.
Tanya Namahachi. It starts a new thing. Tanya Namahachi, the same kind of limud, the same way we're learning here when it comes to Yom Kippur with the goats. We have something very similar when it comes to Mitzorah, and the Mitzorah has to bring the kabbalas of a Mitzorah. Tanya Namahachi, we learned similarly Gabe Kifse Mitzorah when it comes to the sheep of Mitzorah. It says that Mitzorah is Mitzorah for 7 days, and then. So the first time around, he brings those birds, the pigeons, right? One he shechts and one they send away. And then afterwards, he stays another 7 days in quarantine. He comes back to the machna and stays another 7 days. And then on the 8th day, he brings a series of kabbanas. So he brings 2 sheep that are whole, and then he brings 1 sheep that's a year old and so on. So it says there, yikach shnei kvasim. Again, it says shnei kvasim. Could have just said kvasim, which is 2 sheep. Why emphasize 2? Miyud kvasim shnayim. The minimum of 2 kvasim is 2. Matam alei mishnei. Why say 2? Shnei and shavim. We want the 2 to be identical. Uminayin. How do you know she'afa pi she'ein shnei and shavim shavim? So how do you know they're not identical by mitzvah? They're still kosher. Tam aleimer. It says a pasuk keves. It says again. We find the pasuk. It tells you in the psukim right afterwards. It says the word keves, which is in singular form. And to tell you that even 1 is good enough. Says the Gemara, so Riba comes to add that even if he did it 1 on his own, it says like so it says keves singular. It means even they're not the same, they're not identical, it's good enough. We have 2 such psukim. Says the Gemara, so the same style as before, same format. The Rabbi Rahman. Okay, we have an additional pasuk that tells you that even if they're individuals and not the same, they're good enough. Rabbi Rahman, if you wouldn't have these extra 2 psukim that says keves a singular form, how many I would have thought psulin? Why would you think the puzzle? Where's the Torah repeated to make it puzzle? Remember, by kachim it has to be repeated at least twice and emphasized twice before we say if you don't follow it, it's puzzle. So he would have thought. Says the Gemara, I would have thought because by mitzvah it says zois tiyah Torah mitzvah. By saying tiyah, it should be, sounds like by Yom Kippur says chuk. It sounds like you have to follow this exactly, precisely, and not deviate. Says the Gemara, no. So that's why I have to come tell you that even though I told you you should have shnei, that they should be identical, but if you don't, you don't. Says the Gemara. So now, but the Torah says it doesn't really matter if it's identical or not. It could be different individual. Is tia lomali? Then why do you need a pasuk tia that they should be the same? In what way should they be the same? Says the Gemara, they should be the same. Regarding other dinim of mitzayda. And those dinim have to be followed strictly. And if you deviate at all, you're not yotze. But not when it comes to the animals themselves, whether they're similar or not similar, that doesn't matter. Says the Gemara, we also learn Tanya Mitzayda. We learn Mitzayda, a similar thing. Remember the first week, the Mitzayda then has those pigeons. So we find very similar thing regarding the pigeons. It says in the pasuk that you should bring the pigeons. It says shtei tziparim, should be 2 pigeons. Again, same question. Why say the word shtei when it says tziparim? Tziparim mi or tziparim shnai. We know that 2 tziparim, 2 pigeons are 2. Ma tam loy mishtei. So why does the Torah have to emphasize 2? She is shtei and Shabbat, they should all be similar. Uminayin, how do you know? Sha'afa pi she'ein Shabbat. How do even if they're not the same, it's kosher. Because we have 2 psukim where it says tzipar. The Torah tells you what to do with a tzipar. One tzipar you shech, one tzipar you send away. And because it says twice the word tzipar in a singular form, we know that they don't have to be identical. Riba, the Torah comes to add, even if they're not the same. Says the Gemara again, only because we have this extra pasuk to tell you that doesn't have to be the same. Tell me, why would you think it's possible? Where does the Torah repeat it twice? Says the Gemara, I would have thought I would have thought it says T, and again, because it says which we said that in every other respect it has to be the same, they have to follow the rules strictly. So maybe by tziparim as well, it says they have to be the same. Maybe that's liikuva. So therefore, we need that extra limud of tzipar Torah doesn't. Says in Marav Hash, so the Rabbi Nachman tzipar tia lamali. So tzipar tia lamali. So what did the word tia come to tell you? All the other things that make the mitzvah pure again, everything else you have to follow a strict protocol, exactly what it says in the Torah. Says if this is how you're going to learn that every time the Torah says 2 sheep or 2 birds, the word 2 is extra Torah, they have to be the same. So let me ask you a question. We find the same word 2 elsewhere. The carbon tamid that they bring every day, the tamid in the morning and the tamid in the afternoon. Nami nema, why don't we say the same thing? It says in the pasuk that you should bring kavasim, which we know kavasim plural means 2 sheep. And then it says shnayim l'yem tamid, 2. Why does the Torah have to say 2 when we know kavasim already means 2? So according to your way of learning, it means that the 2 sheep have to be identical. How come the Gemara asks? We don't find anywhere such a halacha that by the carbon tummy the 2 animals have to be identical. There's such a halacha. The Gemara name kavasim mi kavasim shnayim 2. Ma tamud leim shnayim. Why did the Torah say shnayim l'yom 2 for the day? She is shnayim shavim. They have to be the same. Umenayin, how do you know? Afa pishayin shnayim shavim. Tamaleim kevas ribas. Says what are you talking about? Oh, because it says in the pasuk, it's a keves echat tasaba boikev, it's a keves shnasam, so it's a singular form. So that's how you know that even though they're not the same, it's good enough. Says what are you telling me that l'chatchila should be the same? Ula mitzvah hachinam medebinin. Is there such a din that by a carbon tummy they have to get 2 sheep that are identical? There's no such din. Never heard of it before. Says the Gemara, you're right. And the pasuk shnayim layim tummy is coming to teach you something totally different. And the emphasis here is shnayim layim. The 2 have to be opposite the day, the brightness of the day, the sunlight. What do you mean? For the following did shnayim layim keneged layim, that where you shech the animal opposite where the sun is. We'll see what that is. You say opposite where the sun is. Maybe the Torah trying to tell you that you should do it twice. You have to bring 2 kabbanas, one in the morning and one simple. Just read the way it says. Shnayim layim. You got to bring 2 animals in a day. So you want to, then it would be superfluous. Because it says right afterwards, one sheep you should do in the morning. One you should do in the afternoon. We already know that you have to do every day 2. So what in the world do I do? What do I do with the word layim? So he says here, it means that what? It should be opposite the day, opposite where the sun comes up. Kate said, what do you mean? What are you supposed to do? The The carbon tummy, remember, we always shechted on the north side, which if you're standing by the Mizbech, it's on the right side. And there were 24 rings there because every single family of Kohanim had their own ring. And what would happen is, there were 6 rows of 4. And what would happen is, or 4 rows of 6. And what would happen is that they would take the animal, they would lift the ring from the ground, put it around the neck of the animal, and that's how they were shecht. That's how they shechted the animals. And so this is all on the right side of the Mizbech. The walls around the base of Mikdash were pretty high, so when the sun started to rise on the east and sets on the west. When the sun started to rise on the east, you couldn't see it straight away. At least you couldn't see the shadows and anything else because the walls were high and the sun was still very low on the horizon. But where the sun, was start to rise in the sky, where you saw the sun was on the west side. That was not on the east side. You would see it on the opposite side. It was further away, and the wall there wasn't blocking. So what they did with the animal was as follows. So in the morning, Tamitz or Shachet, remember you had to do it facing the sun and seeing the sun. They would shecht it on the side of Tzfainis, north, like we just said, but Ma'aravis, right next to the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore there they saw the sun earlier than on the eastern side, which was protected by the wall. And Al Tabashnia, and they would use the second ring. Rashi says he's not exactly sure why the second ring, but they use the second ring. And the afternoon one, when the sun now sets in the west, you had the same problem. So where would you see the sun later, that the sun wasn't hidden yet, was further out to the east. Again, on the north side, on the right side of his bed, but on the east side, away from the base of Mikdash, so they were able to see it. Al Tabashni, again on the second ring.
Tosfos says there's a short Tosfos about Tabashnia, the second Tosfos.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying what Rashi said. So some say that they should put the legs inside there, the rest of the animal put inside there, or they didn't want to bring it as close as possible to Mizbech, so they wanted to move, a little bit further. And the reason for that is in case the animal is all nervous and everything else, starts excreting, so they didn't want to sully that area which is so close to the Mizbech. Okay. Says the Gemara. Musaf and Shal Shabbos, when it comes to the Musaf of Shabbos, when it comes to the Musaf of Shabbos, it says they also Shnei Kvasim, and there definitely, since there's no pasuk that says it in individual form, this is the only place that the carbon Musaf of Shabbos, the 2 sheep have to be identical, and if it isn't, it's actually Ma'akiv. Rashi doesn't like the pshat at all. He says, nowhere does the Gemara ever talk about that it's ma'akev. The Gemara always talks about it's a mitzvah. And therefore he learns pshat that the Gemara means here that by Karbon Musaf, definitely it's a mitzvah to have both to be exactly the same.
It's interesting that the source for these abrais is not Mishnayos for this requirement.
Yeah. Yes. Tarabanan, we learned. Okay, we have a concept called shchuti chutz. Shchuti chutz means that any animal which is suitable to Pesach or any animal which you should have brought inside the Beis Hamikdash, but you didn't bring it inside the Beis Hamikdash. So we learned that if you shecht it, if you sprinkle the blood, hamala, and you put it on if you roast it, you're chayiv koros. So, but if the animal is not suitable to be brought as a carbon, then you're not liable. And this is what the Gemara today and tomorrow is going to be about. So Tarabanan, we learned the 2 goats of Yom Kippur. Now, when it comes to the one that's going to Azazel, that animal is not suitable to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash. You don't bring it up as a carbon, you just throw it off the cliff. So if you did the one from Azazel outside the Beis Hamikdash, l'chayra, you didn't do an Aveira, because it's not El Pesach Oil Levi, because it never belonged to Pesach Oil Moed. But if you took the other animal, which is designated to be La Hashem, a chatas, which should have been done in the Beis Hamikdash, and you shechted it outside, you're liable for shchuti chutz. So says the Gemara, and we learned Shnei Seidei Yom HaKippurim sheshachtem b'chutz. He shechted outside. So it depends. Ad shaloi higril alein. If you didn't make a girdle yet, so each of these 2 animals could have been the carbon chatas. Then chayiv al shneim. You chayiv on both of them. If you shecht them outside, you chayiv because of shchuti chutz, even though you didn't make a girdle yet. So if you didn't make a girdle yet, it had nothing to do with the Beis Hamikdash. So why in the world are you chayiv? And because the requirement is that this animal will belong to the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, it's already consecrated as a carbon, and you're not. But this was before the girdle. So why in the world would you be chayiv at all? We'll see in a minute.
Can you be expecting both of them? That doesn't make any sense because you've got to throw one alive off the cliff.
Yeah, but since we don't know which one, and you're talking about you did both. So we don't know, each one could be. Remember, each one now is potential to be the Karmel Chatas, and that's enough to render you.
But then you can't do Lazazel because they're both dead.
Yeah, but this is before the Geidel, just get another pair. We get another one. If one died, remember we lived before the Geidel, you just get another one. Nothing happened yet.
How could you possibly get into that situation?
What do you mean? This guy took the animals and he ran out of the base of Mikdash and he decided he's going to bring it outside for whatever reason. Or this is just theoretical. Either one. But Mishahegel, once they made a Geidel, so we know that one animal definitely is a Chatas, belongs in the base of Mikdash, but other animals definitely Azazel, does not belong in the base of Mikdash. Then, Chayiv Ashel Shem, if you shechted the one that belongs in the base of Mikdash, then you're liable. But a Pater Ashel Azazel, but you're exempt if you did the one from Azazel, because that doesn't belong in the base of Mikdash. Now, the Gemara has a question. I don't understand. If you did make a Geidel, which means it has nothing, there's no yet connection to the base Hamikdash, Chayiv Ashneim, L'may Chazu, what could you do with it? It has nothing to do with the base of Mikdash yet. So why would you be liable for Shchut Chutz? Amar of Chizah says, Hoyil v'ro l'seir hanase b'chutz. Because this animal could have been, okay, before you made the Geidel, even though it's not suitable yet for the Chatas of the seir inside, because you need to make a Geidel, but what it is suitable is, you already set it up, you set it up for Yom Kippur. It's suitable, there's another occasion on Yom Kippur where they use a goat, and that's a Korban Musaf. So this animal already has a connection to the base of Mikdash, right? You set it aside. True, you didn't make a Geidel, so it's not suitable yet for the Chatas La Hashem, but it's definitely suitable for the seir that goes the Korban Musaf. Hence, it's Shchut Chutz. Says the Gemara. So I don't understand. You're telling me that what do you call it? You're telling me that it's not suitable for the Korban Chatas. That's why you're not. The reason why it's considered Shchut Chutz is not because of the Chatas of the Geidel, but rather because of the seir of the Musaf. But neither is it suitable for the seir of the Musaf, because the seir of Musaf, you need a whole range of activities that need to take place beforehand. The Kohen Gadol has to bring in the Titus into the base of Mikdash, has to sprinkle the blood of the bull and the goat in the 3 different places. So therefore, just like it's not, you're telling me it's not really Shchut Chutz as far as the Korban Chatas Lashem is concerned, because you haven't made the Geidel. So neither, by the same token, neither is it suitable to be used as a seir for the Korban Musaf, because you're not ready for that yet. Says the Gemara, Chizah holds there's a difference between saying not ready for the Korban Musaf or saying it's not ready for Chatas Hashem because of the Geidel. As far as the Musaf is concerned, the problem is not the animal itself. There's a number of extraneous activities that have to take place, which will take place, and then the Musaf is ready. So as far as the Musaf is concerned, it's just a question of time. And Mechusas man is not considered anything missing, and therefore it's suitable for the Musaf. And if you do it outside, you're chayav curse. When it comes to the Geidel is even though it's outside of the goat, outside of the seir of the goats, but it directly relates to the goats. In order for these goats to be brought up, you need to make the Geidel on these animals. So it's considered that it's an inherent part of the animals, and because it's an inherent part of the animals, Kolzman, you didn't make the Geidel. Nothing happened yet. So as far as the Korban Chatas Lashem, if you went ahead, you did it outside. As far as Chatas Lashem, you would not be liable for Shchut Chutz. It's because of the Musaf, which even though in time-wise is not ready yet, it's just a matter of time. There's nothing to be done with the Musaf itself. Told us that if there's an activity that directly pertains to something else, it's considered part of that something else, and as long as you didn't do that, it's lacking, and therefore there wouldn't be another Shchut Chutz, for example, the Geidel. So then I can also add another law. Remember, we learned that the first carbon you bring is a carbon tamid, and you have to first open the doors, the gates of the base of Mikdash. So Shmuel said, Shlomim sheshachtam koidim sheniftachu das lehechel. If you took a shlomim and you shechted it before you open the gates of the base of Mikdash, psulin is possible. Why? Shenemar it says sheshachtu pesach hamoed bizman shehu pasuach v'loy bizman shehu no. You have to shecht animals only while the door is open, the gates are open, but not while the gates are closed. So what happens if shachtan the chutz? What happens if you shechted let's say early morning before the gates open, but you shechted outside the Beis Hamikdash, would you be liable or not? So without Rav Chizda, I would say, yeah, because this animal in a couple of hours would be suitable to be a carbon, so therefore it's chuti chutz. But now that Rav Chizda says, if there's an activity that directly relates to this, it's as if the animal itself is lacking. So I would say potter. My time of why? Because if it's lacking opening the door, it's as if it's lacking something in the animal itself, and therefore this animal is not suitable to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash, and there's no din of shchuti chutz in that case. That's based on Rab Chizda's chiddush that we say this concept over here, and we'll talk about more tomorrow in tomorrow's.